Thank you for joining us for Grim Advice with Gretta Myers. You've entered the grimoire. Let's turn the page together. This one is one of the longer stories, and one you've actually heard of. And I'm gonna warn you, my analysis ended up being a lot longer than I intended. So this is gonna be a long video, so if you want to just skip to the end of the story, I'll post exact time frame down in the video description thing. If you just want to skip to the analysis because you've heard this one, that's fine by me. So, without further ado, Hansel and Gretel. Near a great forest dwelt a poor woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. He had little to bite and to break, and when great scarcity fell on the land, he could no longer procure daily bread. Now when he thought over this at night in his bed and tossed about in his anxiety, he groaned and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children when we no longer have anything even for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman. "Early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the forest where it is the thickest. There we will light a fire for them and give each of them 1 piece of bread, and then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will not find the way home again, and we shall be rid of them." "No, wife," said the man. I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? The wild animals would soon come and tear them to pieces." "Oh, you fool," said she. "Then we must all 4 die of hunger. You may as well plane the planks for our coffins." And she let him have no peace until he consented. "But I feel very sorry for the poor children all the same," said the man. The 2 children had also not been able to sleep for hunger, and had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitter tears and said to Hansel, "Now all is over for us." "Hush, Gretel," said Hansel. "Do not distress yourself. I will soon find a way to help us." And when the old folks had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the door below, and crept outside. The moon shone brightly, and the white pebbles which lay in front of the house glittered like real silver pennies. Hansel stooped and put as many of them in the little pocket of his coat as he could possibly get in. Then he went back and said to Gretel, "Be comforted, dear little sister, and sleep in peace. God will not forsake us." And he lay down again in his bed. When day dawned, but before the sun had risen, the woman came and awoke the 2 children, saying, "Get up, you sluggards, we are going into the forest to fetch wood." She gave each a little piece of bread and said, "There's something for your dinner, but do not eat it up before then, for you will get nothing else." Gretel took the bread under her apron, as Hansel had the stones in his pocket. Then they all set out together on the way to the forest. When they had walked a short time, Hansel stood still and peeped back at the house, and did so again and again. His father said, "Hansel, what are you looking at there and standing behind for? Mind yourself and do not forget how to use your legs." "Ah, father," said Hansel, "I am looking at my little white cat, which is sitting up on the roof and wants to say good-bye to me." The wife said, "Fool, that is not your little cat. That is the morning sun which is shining on the chimneys." Hansel, however, had not been looking back at the cat, but had been constantly throwing one of the white pebbles out of his pocket on the road. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now, children, pile up some wood, and I will light a fire, that you may not be cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood together as high as a little hill. The brushwood was lighted, and when the flames were burning very high, the woman said, "Now, children, lay yourselves down by the fire and rest. We will go into the forest and cut some wood. When we have done, we will come back and fetch you away." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire. When noon came, each ate a little piece of bread, and as they heard the strokes of the wood axe, they believed that their father was near. It was not, however, the axe. It was a branch which he had fastened to a withered tree, which the wind was blowing backwards and forwards, and as they had been sitting such a long time, their eyes shut with fatigue, and they fell fast asleep. When at last they awoke, it was already dark night. Gretel began to cry and said, How are we to get out of the forest now?" But Hansel comforted her and said, "Just wait a little until the moon has risen, and then we will soon find the way." And when the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand, and followed the pebbles which shone like newly coined silver pieces, and showed them the way. They walked the whole night long, and by break of day came once more to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it and saw that it was Hansel and Gretel, she said, "You naughty children, why have you slept so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming back at all." The father, however, rejoiced, for it had cut him to the heart to leave them behind alone. Not long afterwards, there was once more great scarcity in all parts, and the children heard their mother saying at night to their father, "Everything is eaten again. We have 1/2 loaf left, and after that there is no more. The children must go. We will take them farther into the woods so that they will not find their way out again. There is no other means of saving ourselves." The man's heart was heavy, and he thought, "It would be better for you to share the last mouthful with your children." The woman, however, would listen to nothing that he had to say, but scolded and reproached him. He who says A must say B likewise, and as he had yielded the first time, he had to do so a second time also. The children were, however, still awake and had heard the conversation. When the old folks were asleep, Hansel again got up and wanted to go out and pick up pebbles as he had done before, but the woman had locked the door, and Hansel could not get out. Nevertheless, he comforted his little sister and said, "Do not cry, Gretel. Go to sleep quietly. The good God will help us." Early in the morning came the woman and took the children out of their beds. Their bit of bread was given to them, but it was still smaller than the time before. On the way into the forest, Hansel crumbled his in his pocket and often stood still and threw a morsel on the ground. "Hansel, why do you stop and look round?" said the father. "Go on." "I am looking back at my little pigeon, which is sitting on the roof, and wants to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "Simpleton," said the woman, "that is not your little pigeon, that is the morning sun that is shining on the chimney." Hansel, however, little by little threw all the crumbs on the path. The woman led the children still deeper into the forest, where they had never in their lives been before. Then a great fire was again made, and the mother said, "Just sit here, you children, and when you are tired, you may sleep a little. We are going into the forest to cut wood, and in the evening, when we are done, we will come and fetch you away." When it was noon, Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel, who had scattered his by the way. Then they fell asleep, and evening came and went, but no one came to the poor children. They did not awake until it was dark night, and Hansel comforted his little sister and said, "Just wait, Gretel, until the moon rises, then we shall see the crumbs of bread which I have strewn about. They will show us our way home again." When the moon came, they set out, but they found no crumbs, for the many thousands of birds which fly about in the woods and fields had picked them up. Hansel said to Gretel, "We shall soon find the way," but they did not find it. They walked the whole night and all the next day, too, from morning till evening, but they did not get out of the forest and were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but 2 or 3 berries, which grew on the ground, and as they were so weary that their legs would carry them no longer, and they lay down beneath a tree and fell asleep. It was now 3 mornings since they had left their father's house. They began to walk again, and they also got deeper into the forest, and if help did not come soon, they would die of hunger and weariness. When it was midday, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a bough, which sang so delightfully that they stood still and listened to it. And when it had finished its song, it spread its wings and flew away before them. And they followed it until they reached a little house, on the roof of which it alighted. And when they came quite up to the little house, they saw that it was built of bread covered with cakes, but that the windows were of clear sugar. "We will set to work on that," said Hansel, "and have a good meal. I will eat a bit of the roof, and you, Gretel, can eat some of the window, and it will taste sweet." Hansel reached up above and broke a little off the roof to try how it tasted, and Gretel leaned against the window and nibbled at the panes. Then a soft voice cried from the room, "Nibble, gnaw, nibble, nibble, gnaw, who's nibbling at my little house?" The children answered, the wind, the heaven-born wind," and went on eating without disturbing themselves. Hansel, who thought the roof tasted very nice, tore down a great piece of it, and Gretel pushed out the whole of one round window pane, sat down, and enjoyed herself with it. Suddenly the door opened, and a very, very old woman, who supported herself on crutches, came creeping out. Hansel and Gretel were so terribly frightened that they let fall what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Oh, you dear children, who has brought you here? Do come in and stay with me. No harm shall happen to you." She took them both by the hand and led them into her little house. Then good food was set before them, milk and pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. Afterwards 2 pretty little beds were covered with clean white linen, and Hansel and Gretel lay down in them and thought they were in heaven. The old woman had only pretended to be so kind. She was in reality a wicked witch who lay in wait for children, and had only built the little house of bread in order to entice them there. When a child fell into her power, she killed it, cooked it, and ate it, and that was a feast day with her. Witches have red eyes and cannot see far, but they have a keen scent like the beasts, and are aware when human beings draw near. When Hansel and Gretel came into her neighborhood, she laughed maliciously and said mockingly, "I have them, they shall not escape me again." Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she was already up, and when she saw both of them sleeping and looking so pretty with their plump red cheeks, she muttered to herself, "This will be a dainty mouthful." Then she seized Hansel with her shriveled hand, carried him into a little stable, and shut him in with a grated door. He might scream as he liked, that was of no use. Then she went to Gretel, shook her till she awoke, and cried, "Get up, lazy thing, fetch some water, and cook something good for your brother. He is in the stable outside, and is to be made fat, and when he is fat, I will eat him." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was all in vain. She was forced to do what the wicked witch ordered her. And now the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the woman crept to the little stable and said, "Hansel, stretch out your finger that I may feel it, if you will soon be fat." Hansel, however, stretched out a little bone to her, and the old woman, who had dim eyes, could not see it, and thought it was Hansel's finger, and was astonished that there was no way of fattening him. When 4 weeks had gone by and Hansel stayed thin, she was seized with impatience and would not wait any longer. "Now, Gretel," she cried to the girl, "be active and bring some water. Let Hansel be fat or lean. Tomorrow I will kill him and cook him." How the poor little sister did lament when she had to fetch the water, and how her tears did flow over her cheeks. "Dear God, do help us," she cried. "If the wild beasts in the forest had devoured us, at least we should have died together." "Just keep your noise to yourself," said the old woman. "All that won't help you at all." Early in the morning, Gretel had to go out and hang up the cauldron with the water and light the fire. "We will bake first," said the old woman. "I have already heated the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel out to the oven, from which flames of fire were already darting. "Creep in," said the witch, "to see if it's properly heated, so that we can shut the bread in." And once Gretel was inside, she intended to shut the oven and let her bake in it, and then she would eat her too. But Gretel saw what she had in her mind, and said, "I do not know how I am to do it. How do you get in?" "Silly goose," said the old woman, "the door is big enough. Just look, I can get in myself." And she crept up and thrust her head into the oven. And then Gretel gave her a push that drove her far into it, and she shut the iron door and fastened the bolt. Oh! Then she began to howl quite horribly, but Gretel ran away, and the godless witch was miserably burnt to death. Gretel, however, ran like lightning to Hansel, opened his little stable, and cried, "Hansel, we are saved, the old witch is dead." Then Hansel sprang out like a bird from its cage when the doors opened for it. How they did rejoice and embrace each other and dance about and kiss each other, and as they had no longer any need to fear her, they went into the witch's house, and in every corner there stood chests full of pearls and jewels. "These are far better than pebbles," said Hansel, and thrust into his pockets whatever could be got in. And Gretel said, "I too will take something home with me," and filled her pinafore full. "And now we will go away," said Hansel, "that we may get out of the witch's forest." When they had walked for 2 hours, they came to a great body of water. "We cannot get over," said Hansel. "I see no footplank and no bridge." "And no boat crosses either," answered Gretel, "but a white duck is swimming there. If I ask her, she will help us over." Then she cried, little duck, do you see? Hansel and Gretel are waiting for you. There's never a plank or a bridge in sight. Take us across on your back so white." The duck came to them, and Hansel seated himself on its back, and told his sister to sit by him. "No," replied Gretel, "that will be too heavy for the little duck. She shall take us across, one after the other." The good little duck did so, and when they were safely across and had walked for a short time, this forest seemed to be more and more familiar to them, and at length they saw from afar their father's house. They began to run, rushed into the parlor, and threw themselves into their father's arms. The man had not known one happy hour since he had left the children in the forest. The woman, however, was dead. Gretel emptied her pinafore until pearls and precious stones ran about the room, and Hansel threw one handful after another out of his pocket to add to them. Then all anxiety was at an end, and they lived together in perfect happiness. My tale is done. See the mouse run. Whoever catches it may make himself a big fur cap out of it. Okay, let's do a really short. First, okay, let's point out that the mom wasn't even a stepmom this time. She was just a mom. And a lot of you are saying, yeah, that's a terrible mom. But again, fear does things to people. And she's afraid of starving. She's afraid of her children starving. She's afraid of watching her children starve. Again, I'm assuming. But again, you never know like what exactly is going on in someone's head. Man, also, sorry for switching back between Hansel and Hansel. Hansel's smart, like really smart. Like, let's give this kid like 1,000 applause right now. Okay, I just love that she just falls for the classic blunder of, I don't know how to do it. Can you show me? Can you show me how to do it? The kids will pull that. They're like, I don't know how to do it. Can you show me? And by the time you show them, it's like, well, it's done. Sly little devil. She fell for the classic blunder. Also, I kind of like how it doesn't necessarily say how the woman died. Did she starve? Did the dad, like, man up and, like, kill her or whatever? Like, did they get in an argument and it was murder? I don't know. I really don't know. Like, it was just said, and she died. Which is weird because the Brothers Grimm don't normally just not leave death without detail. Okay. Also, can we just talk about the fact that the whole time, like, this is the least censored of the popular Grimm fairy tales. Like, and nowadays, Sleeping Beauty, very censored. Rapunzel, very censored. Beauty and the Beast, like, censored. Like, especially considering that one corporation that makes those censored movies for children. I mean, Snow White, they got closer with the movie. I guess maybe it hasn't been made a movie adaptation, but when these fairy tales are told to children now, I have not met many people who don't know the actual ending of Hansel and Gretel. They're like, yep, they push the witch into the oven and she burns to death. And you might be thinking, why? But here's my uneducated theory. As one does. I think it's incredibly important. This story. Okay. Obviously, you got that don't take candy from strangers or whatever. Or just don't trust strangers in general. Which in reality is pretty outdated. Because we're surrounded by strangers. And so just saying don't trust strangers is gonna, like, well, the kid goes to school. Like, do they not supposed to trust their teachers? Are they not supposed to, like, talk to their peers? Like, I don't know what you're... And, like, what about doctors and nurses? And if a kid does end up lost, how's he gonna get home? I mean, I know the average kid nowadays has a cell phone. But say he doesn't. Say he loses the cell phone and he's lost in a park. And again, not that I'm saying don't like trust them completely, but don't trust strangers is kind of unrealistic. And so in self-defense, in children's self-defense, they'll teach them good stranger, bad stranger. To make the point that not everyone in this world is out to get you. Are there a lot of people that will harm you if they get the chance? Yes. Dialectic toast. There's also a lot of people that would help you given the chance. Again, it all depends on the person. Like, there are some, like, rough, tough-looking guys or girls that could end up being super sweet. But a mom with kids could end up being super nasty mean. I don't know. And again, dialectic toast. You've got to do it safe. Like everything. You'll get a bad feeling in the pit of your stomach. Like, some people call it the uh-oh feeling, their intuition, their gut instinct, whatever. You will get that bad feeling that either this is a bad situation, I need to get out of it, or this is an unsafe person in general. Maybe not a bad person, but unsafe. So you need to stop, you need to get away from them. Granted, sometimes that sense can be it can be tweaked through experiences and paranoia and different mental illnesses or different substances you're on. Like certain prescription medications, not just, drugs and alcohol, but that definitely, like certain prescription medications will give you a more heightened sense of your awareness, and that can really mess with people. Or just general life experience, like, someone who gets bit by a dog is going to think all dogs are bad. So, again, so if you're starting to think everyone around you is evil, and I recognize quarantine's really hard and everyone's getting on each other's nerves, but there's a difference between people are getting on your nerves and I am certain that every single person I know is out to get me. If you're feeling that, seek help. I mean, obviously I'm no mental health professional, but I'm speaking from my experience and other people's experiences, so just, there's a certain degree of normal, and that's not normal. Okay, going back to the idea of self-defense, which is why I think this story hasn't been dumbed down as much. Like, Little Red Riding Hood is another one that's not as dumbed down as some versions you'll get the dumbed down, but it's less often as these other Grimm fairy tales that are really popular and are misrepresented all the time. Not misrepresented, whatever. That's why I think it's so important, is because it shows very clearly this idea of self-defense that kids can do. It's not saying beat the bad guy up. Although, come on, she's an old lady on crutches. I mean, I get that she probably has magic because she's a witch. But again, witch is a very different term than it was in those... Witch, in those days, was any woman who was considered abnormal. So, she didn't necessarily have magic. So, they might have been able to beat her up. I don't know. The point is, she did what worked for her, and it was still self-defense. So if you get that bad feeling in the pit of your stomach and you just can't get away easily, like just walking away, the final choice of what you do is up to you. I mean, clearly, not all of us are gonna push an old woman, no matter how evil she is into an oven and shut the door. That's not for everyone. Every situation is different. There's not something you can say for every single... When teaching self-defense, they don't say this is going to work for every single situation. In fact, they clearly say every situation is different, and in the end, it's up to you. And what you do is valid. More on that later. But what I'm saying is, it's okay to do it like Gretel. It's okay to do absolutely everything you can and have to keep you and yourself and other people around you safe. And get out of there. And that, yeah, like, she did everything in her power. She tricked the witch, she cooked the witch, and she got herself and Hansel out of there. And that's valid. It is very valid to do everything, absolutely everything you are able to do to get yourself and others to safety. It's valid. And it is valid to not be able to get anyone to safety but yourself. It might suck. And it's still valid. Dialectic toast. It is also to not be able to do anything in the moment. I mean, originally in the beginning, Gretel, like, for a month, it says that for a month they stayed there. And they didn't do anything necessarily in the situation. The dad, when the mom was like, we gotta go and abandon them in the forest, he didn't like it. But for him in that situation, it made sense. Okay, so again, every situation, as we've seen, is different. And I'm not you, so I cannot tell you, I cannot possess you in that moment and say, do this. Well, that would be cool. It probably wouldn't end well, because I'm not as good under high pressure situations as I am on camera. I'm not even that great on camera. So there are four responses to fear: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fawn is one that has come up more recently and has been talked about and, like, explored more recently, while fight, flight, and freeze have said to be more, like, prehistoric in nature. And so let me give you a little bit of a breakdown. Fight, I mean, you punch something, or you kick something, you bite something, you fight, you clawing to the nail, or you yell or scream. Now let me be very clear. They are different things. Yelling is a good thing to do in situations like these. Screaming is almost never a good thing to do. Like yelling no in a big and loud in a situation is a good idea, and especially because it like tells people around you, no, this is not something that I want to be happening to me right now. Like, go away. Again, it kind of depends on the situation and the fear. Like, if again, these reactions and responses can be tweaked and messed with due to life experiences. So if someone like comes up behind you at school and was like, "Hey man," and you just no, and everyone's like, "What the heck?" It's probably a bit of a too big reaction. I'm not gonna say overreaction, but too big a reaction for the moment. Screaming, on the other hand, is one. A lot of times, police officers have said that if there's screaming going on, they can mistake it for fun, because, you know, there's a lot of times when the kids will be running around or stuff, and they'll be screaming, and it'll be fun, and they're having a good time. So police officers will ignore screaming. They will come with you yell. Yelling comes from the diaphragm, from the gut. It does not come from the voice box. That's the other important key, because if you yell, you're not going to lose your voice. If you scream, your voice is going to be gone pretty quick. Okay, and then back to the breakdown. Flight, you run away. Or sometimes you mentally run away, paired with the next one is freeze, where you freeze. Like, if something's happening, like, stereotypical movie reaction, you hear, like, the two big baddies are, like, doing a drug deal, so you, against the wall, you breathe really quietly, really, because you're trying not to be seen or heard. And some people their bodies will freeze, and they'll stop, like, physically reacting, and sometimes they'll mentally dip. They'll be like, peace, y'all, I'm gone. And freezing happens because your body thinks, if I don't move, and if I don't do something big and react, like fighting, or trying to leave, then I'll be in less danger. And sometimes, and that's valid, it's valid. Sometimes it's true. Like, in a hostage situation, you see on TV, a lot of people tend to freeze, because guns are pretty scary. So fighting and flighting might not be the best thing in the situation, necessarily. However, this is one of the ones that if you catch yourself doing, you can make the choice to try and do something else. Like, if you catch yourself and you're like, I'm freezing, and you realize maybe that's not what I want to do for this situation, you want to try to fight or flight, we're getting to that fourth one in a minute, then that's valid. You can do that. Like Gretel, she stayed for 4 weeks. She stayed for a whole month before she did something. But when the opportunity arose and she saw, I can do that, she did it. And that is valid. Okay, fawn is a harder one to catch. Because it takes a lot more cognition. It's also kind of a form of freezing, which is why a lot of people didn't, like, notice its existence for a while. Fawning is, like, when you fawn over someone, you're, like, giving them all the attention, and you're worshipping them, and you're adoring them. You're throwing yourself into the situation, so, like, let's say there's this really mean kid in movies, there'll be the bully, and the bully's like toady or sidekick. And the sidekick is usually throwing themselves into it. They're like, well, if you can't beat him, join him. Not that that's necessarily always bad, but it's like, well, this person's big and scary, so if I show them adoration and praise, then they won't hurt me.